Everyone. Okay, so my name's Claire. I'm a researcher at the Centre for Appearance Research, and I'm here to talk to you today about a Delphi survey we conducted to establish the research priorities for facial palsy. So just a bit of background. So despite the potentially negative impact of facial palsy, there's been very little research into the treatment and care of those affected as we know. And what facial palsy wanted to do was they wanted to create a research agenda. So what they wanted to do is a consultation and priority setting exercise. And the topic was, what topics do patients, carers, health professionals and researchers think need to be researched in the field of facial palsy? And it's hoped that these findings will underpin future grant applications into research. Can you hear me if I keep turning around? So Facial Palsy UK asked the Centre for Appearance Research to be involved in this research priority setting exercise, and we're a centre of excellence for research and appearance related studies, and we have over 30 members including academics, psychologists, researchers and students, and we collaborate with a wide range of audiences including charities, the NHS, schools and government bodies both in the UK and internationally. So just a bit about what a Delphi method is, and I'll try and keep it as simple as possible, not bore you with the details of this research method. So it's a group decision process, and it's used to find out the range of opinions on certain matters from experts and to achieve agreement on these. And its use in health research has really been expanding in recent years, and it really assists researchers and policymakers to target research that has the potential for the greatest benefit. So the first round, group opinion is sought, so people will go out and get all the opinions from a range of experts, and then the next round will then ask people to rate these opinions. And its advantages are that it can be completed remotely, so people from all across the country can take part, and also participants can express their opinions freely because it's completed remotely and there's no pressure from anyone else. So the Facial Palsy Delphi was conducted between February and June this year, and their aim was to find out what do patients, carers, health professionals and researchers believe are the top 10 priorities for facial palsy research. So to do this we had to recruit respondents to take part in this. So Karen kindly did a lot of work right at the beginning with this. So we used the Facial Palsy UK mailing list to invite people. We also had adverts on the Facial Palsy UK website, Twitter and Facebook. We also asked the Medical Advisory Board to take part and invite others. And we also used snowball sampling, so we had people that took part to forward the invitation to others if they thought that they might be able to contribute. So this might be quite small on the screen, so I'll talk it through. So what we did in round one is we had focus groups. And we had these focus groups in London in February. Unfortunately, on the day, Storm Doris hit, and half of the people couldn't make it. Even Karen didn't make it, she was stuck on a train. So we had 9 people manage to make it and take part. It was hoping to be double that, but it's still really useful that we had those 9 people come. And we also had an online survey in round one. And in both of those, we asked people, what are the research priorities for facial palsy, and got people to propose what topics they think need to be researched. We then analysed this, so all the data was combined, and researchers at the Centre for Appearance Research analysed it, and similar questions were grouped together. So as you can imagine, quite a few topics were similar, and we combined them into one research question. So in round 2, we did an online survey to all those that had registered to take part in round 1, and we asked them to rate all of the research priorities on a scale of 1, very important, to 5, very unimportant. So then we statistically analysed this data, and questions that were not rated very important or important by 70% of the respondents were removed, and we only had 3 that were actually removed from that round. So then we went on to round 3, so we put all the questions that had gone forward to the next round out again via online survey, and asked participants again to rate on a scale of 1 to 5 how important they thought the 42 research priorities were. And in this round, they were provided with the agreement in the previous round, so they got to find out what the rest of the group were thinking about the research priorities. So then we analysed this again, statistically, and questions that were not rated very important or important were removed. We only had 6, again, removed from this round. And this left us with 36 priorities that 70% of the group had rated were worthy of future research. And we split these into the top 10 patient and carer and family member priorities and the top 10 health professional and researcher priorities, because a lot more patients and carers took part than health professionals, and if we didn't do that and split it, we'd find that the research priorities wouldn't really be representative of both groups. So I don't know if it's come up quite light on the screen. So we had 93% of people were living with facial palsy, of the patient and carer respondents. And then we also had a couple that were carers and a couple that had a personal connection. They were like a sibling or a grandparent was another one. Can you see it at all? You probably can't see it. So we had 40% of respondents had Bell's palsy, and we had 16% had acoustic neuroma, and then we had Ramsay-Hunt syndrome, and then the rest of them were birth traumas or other causes of facial palsy. So in terms of the health professional respondents, half of these were surgeons, and a quarter of them were physiotherapists, and the remaining were charity workers, a facial rehabilitation specialist, and researchers. And on average, their experience was around 10 years of working with patients with facial palsy or researching the topic. Okay, so these are the top 10 research priorities. Again, it's come up quite small on the screen, so I'm going to read each one out for you. So on the left-hand side, I've put the rank of patients and carers. So this is the way patients and carers ranked it. And then the next column is where health professionals ranked the priorities. So number 1, we had what is the existing knowledge of frontline healthcare staff, especially GPs, when dealing with facial palsy, and how can this be improved? So that was the number 1 patient and carer priority, and that came out as number 7 with the health professionals. At number 2, we had how can vision be preserved in patients who are unable to close their eye? And you can see that the health professionals rated this quite highly as well. Then we had what is the best protocol for clinically managing facial palsy, including the type of treatment, its timing and its sequence, and again, both patients and health professionals rated this highly. Number 4, we had how can psychonesis be prevented and treated? Then we had what influence does access or no access to treatment have on patients' functional and psychological outcomes? And again, you can see that health professionals and patients and carers are thinking around the same for that one. At number 6, we had how effective are non-invasive methods for treating facial palsy, such as physiotherapy, external facial nerve stimulation. At number 7, we had what is the psychosocial impact of living with facial palsy, both in adults and in children? And then we had what information do individuals require upon a diagnosis of facial palsy? What is the best way to manage eye discomfort, such as dry eyes and watering in those living with facial palsy? And what are the treatment options, both surgical and non-surgical? And the remaining 3 at the bottom are the other 3 in the top 10 of the health professionals' priorities. And you can see why these might have been their priorities, because it is related to their practice. So we had quite highly, what are the most reliable set of measures? So to measure the functional and psychological aspect of facial palsy and its treatment outcomes. Then they had further down their list was standardising the way that they objectively assess patients with facial palsy, and then advancing the methods of facial reanimation and surgical care. So obviously there were more research priorities that did reach consensus. Those aren't in the top 10, but they're still worthy of future research because they did achieve agreement amongst the group. So we had, is synkinesis due to cortical reorganisation or change in the wiring in the brain following injury? What type of psychological interventions are most effective for patients and at what time point? What are the protocols for treating those presenting in A&E with symptoms of facial palsy? How can we support patients, including children, when they are making a decision whether to have surgical treatment? What is the impact of Botox on nerve retraining, recovery and outcome? What facilitates resilience and coping in those living with facial palsy? And how can we best raise awareness of facial palsy and its associated impacts amongst the general public? And there is a document that, I don't know if it's on the website, is it yet, the full report? So there is a full report on the Facial Palsy UK website if you do want to have a look at where those priorities ranked. And I must say that most of the priorities were rated very highly, so it might be rated 4 and 5, but there really is a tiny difference in between those ratings. So it's not necessary to say that something's been rated highly. It's much more important than the others because there was that just such a little difference. Everything was rated very, very important. So just in conclusion, so this is the first study worldwide to establish the research priorities for facial palsy, and this is a significant first step. We had 71% of people took part in all 3 rounds, which is very high, and perhaps indicates how important people that were responding thought it was to advance research in the area. And 36 of 45 of the original research priorities from round 1 remained throughout, so that just goes to show how important most of the research was that was suggested. And 7 out of the 10 research priorities were shared amongst professionals, as I showed before. So these are perhaps the ones that require the most urgent attention for research in the future. So obviously we've done all this research. You might think, why have we done it? What next? So what we want to do is share the findings with researchers, clinicians and funding bodies. So we've got a publication that myself, Charles, Karen and a couple of members of the centre where I work, we're working on that. We're going to get that in an academic journal so it can be referenced by health professionals. We're also going to do as many presentations as possible. We also want to direct those who are interested in conducting facial palsy research to the priorities. So say if you're a health professional, someone comes to you saying they want to do research, or you have a student, you might want to direct them to those priorities. And also it's hoped that these research priorities will underpin future grant applications for research, and it really demonstrates what research needs to be done and gives some evidence for that to funding bodies. So just some acknowledgements. We want to say thank you to all of the participants that gave up their time to take part. I'm sure many of you in the room. Charles Naduka for initiating the project and asking CAR to get involved. Karen Johnson for all of her hard work in launching the study and recruiting participants at the beginning. And also the worshipful company of grocers who actually gifted £5,000 to help this research happen. I just want to say one more thing, because Karen asked me to tag this on. We've developed a game at the Centre for Appearance Research called Everybody's Different, the Appearance Game. And it's a board game for children aged 9 plus and developed by Focus Games. And it aims to help children understand that differences in appearance are normal and promote diversity. So you can find out more about the game there. There's also a copy, I think Karen had the first copy in the country, of the game. So if you want to have a look at it, it's out there and you can purchase it via that link. And if you have any questions about the research priorities and exercise, you're welcome to email me at the email address at the bottom. And I'm happy to take any questions if you have any.